it's fine.
What do you prefer?
Good morning, everyone. Ciao, Sebastiano.
Hello, everyone. Hi.
Hello.
Okay, I think everyone's trickling in. Maybe give it a minute or two so that they keep joining and we can then slowly get started. In the meantime, I'll just some introductions and housekeeping rules. So my name is Francisco Andrade Silva. I'm a manager at Exo, and with us today we'll have Sebastiano Tofaletti from the Digital SME Alliance, Matthias Mullert from the Article Group, and Roberto Cascella from Exo as well, going over the EuroStack concept and discussing a bit the role of the cybersecurity community in this new push for technological sovereignty. In essence, today we'll go through a bit the concept so everyone's on the same page, and Sebastiano will take us together through that, and then we'll engage in a bit of a fireside chat discussion moderated by Roberto between Sebastiano and Matthias, and we will discuss, as we said, the role of the cybersecurity community there. The session is recorded, so take that into account. There will be some time at the end for some questions from the audience, 10 minutes around that much time for a bit of a discussion. But if you have any questions in the meantime, feel free to put it in the chat or in the Q&A, and then we can address them and go over them. The webinar today is a joint initiative between EXO and the European Digital SME Alliance. Thanks for the support also from the Digital SME Alliance for the organization and the communication there. And I think we can get started as it's 4 minutes past. So over to you, Sebastiano. Thanks again. And I think you can share the screen on your end. So I'll stop sharing mine. Thanks again.
Yes, hi. If you don't mind, I think you can use the slides that I sent, so I don't need to share it from my screen while I'm talking. So, is it okay?
Yeah, give me a second. They should be coming right up.
Sure. I'll just try to keep this relatively brief, so we have time for the discussion later. And what I wanted to do is to walk everyone through the concept of the EuroStack and how this has been developed until today, and what are a little bit the current demands or current proposals that are coming out of this movement. Just waiting for the first slide to appear there, but I guess it is coming. Yes, amazing. Very good, Francisco. Thank you very much. If you can just enlarge it and then you move to the next one.
It's loading the
anyway, the next slide you're going to see in a second, yes, there we are, is where all of this conversation has started, which was in September 2024, so months ago. where there was a large event organized in the European Parliament by three parties. So interestingly, it was a multi-party event. The Greens, the Socialists, and the EPP on this idea of EuroStack, and in particular, the focus was very much around digital independence and I would say essentially the concept of digital public infrastructure. So there was, a strong, let's say, consensus that Europe could not be any longer a colony, a digital colony of the US or of China. So there was a strong push towards, tech sovereignty. This was even before the election of Trump and all the facts that we have seen in the last couple of months. But the idea was already very clear that Europe needed to have a greater level of independence. Again, this was mainly, I believe, about the conversation was mainly around the concept of digital public infrastructure, intended as things like, connectivity, digital identity, payments, government services, all of these things that in a way or another underpin the access to many things in the digital space. Interestingly, in that event, there were several interventions from speakers coming from other regions in the world, Taiwan, India, even Brazil, Korea. There was, a good, I would say, level of conversation, trying to learn also from the experiences of other regions. I mean, think about India has been very advanced in this, especially with their concept of the so-called India Stack, which is a kind of open source infrastructure, which is really getting a very large deployment. With really millions and millions of users daily using this stack they have in India, especially underpinning the payment systems. And this was done with really also an idea to make India independent from third-party commercial the service providers, think about Visa or MasterCard, just to name a few. The experience of India was quite inspiring to demonstrate that it was technically possible to free some of the space from the dominance of certain companies and get a higher level of sovereignty, for the benefit of the citizens and for the benefit of the local economy as well. That event basically, give a big push to the development of the idea. But it was mainly things which were unwritten. Okay, there was no documented theory around it. It was more of a discussion, and interestingly, a core group of of speakers or participants in this event then decided to start, collecting ideas and start putting things on paper and work together to develop this kind of theory, this kind of ideology that would ideally underpin this EuroStack movement. And that was, maybe you can go to the next slide. And so there were a few initiatives which started from that event. A network of people which was loosely communicating with each other, but without, a kind of vertical organization around it, without hierarchy or so. So everyone started working a little bit on in their fields, and probably certainly the first of the documents which was published came out early in 2025, around the end of January. And this was an attempt, it's called the pitch, the one you see, the EuroStack pitch, the one you see on the screen. And this was an attempt to analyze the entire ecosystem and figure what were the layers that are essentially the choke points that need to be controlled in order to, extract the value of the digital ecosystem. So the authors were essentially myself. There was Cristina Caffara, who's an economist, Robert Burgeon, who's a technologist, Vittorio Bertola, who was an open source expert and internet standards expert, Kai Zenner, from an academic, but works in the European Parliament in the office of Axel Voss. And there was, interestingly, Francesco Bonfiglio, which some of you probably know, the former Director General of Gaia X, that brought in a lot of, I would say, good experience of what had been the experience of Gaia X in trying to create this a European federated cloud. So I think it was a good mix of different points of view and backgrounds, and we came out with this description of the stack made of 3 layers: hard physical infrastructure, software logical layer, and intermediation layer, which is, we realize that this is just one of the ways to describe what is around us, what is this digital world that we are all in. And there are obviously a lot of connection between things, and there is, one need to be, one will have to have, 100 people, 100 experts to really understand the nitty-gritties of all the connection and all the layers. But this was a way to describe what was there, okay? And the principle underneath was this understanding that there is a constellation of assets which constitute the value chain of the digital economy. Okay, and this is a very important concept, because what is this constellation of assets? I would say the most important of these assets are the connectivity infrastructure. So how the data is transported and reaches, the consumers and the businesses. The second one is the cloud computing. So this is the core, this is the engine, this is the processing of the data. The third one are the online platforms. So how the services which are being generated through the cloud computing actually reach the consumers. So the distribution layer. And the fourth one, you probably guess it, is the AI large language models, which are, I would say, an additional engine, an additional asset, which is capable of creating services which are even better. So the control of these assets is fundamental, because any company that is in the digital economy somehow, in one way or another, will have to use or have access to all of these or some of these assets, if you think about it. And essentially the issue is then that the accumulation of those assets in the hands of the same companies, okay, essentially underpins an extractive business model where the innovators are companies or people which are at the periphery of the digital ecosystem, and startups or innovating companies, and what happens is that they get their rents extracted from the companies which are at the center of this constellation of assets. I don't know if you think about the example of we've been trying in Europe to create these tech champions. Think about the well-known example is in AI. This Mistral, the French champion in AI. At some point, Mistral, even if they had fantastic ideas, talent, etc., they had no choice but using the Microsoft computing power and distributing through their platform, because they had none of these two assets, right? So they had to get in partnership with someone else. And of course, who was this? It was an American company. So you see the end of any innovative company that is generated in Europe would either be acquired by the US giants or start orbiting around them. And when you start orbiting, of course, your value gets extracted. So this is actually a theory which explains very well what Draghi had highlighted in his report in the last summer, which was this gap in productivity between Europe and the US, where he realized that there is no gap essentially in any industrial sector if you compare Europe with the US, except in one sector, which is the ICT sector. And the gap in productivity in that sector actually justifies a big gap in the economy in general. But this gap, we believe, is due to this productivity gap. We believe is due to this extractive business model. So the better we do as innovators, the better they will do. The more rent they will extract from us. Ultimately, this EuroStack theory is trying to say that the priority for Europe must be to achieve ownership and control of the critical infrastructure. Again, the assets I mentioned earlier. If one does not get that, it is useless to try to do anything else, because it will just not work. It will just not solve the underlying problem. And this explains also the failure of all the policies in the last at least couple of decades, where the capitals and Brussels have desperately trying to throw a lot of public money in the market with the hope that the market will create the next European tech champion, the next Google or the next whatever. And if you think about it, we have been throwing a lot of public money into this idea, and we are still doing that, but it never achieved. It never worked. And so if we keep doing that, the result is going to be the same. It's going to be the repetition of what we have seen in the last 20 years. So again, either our startups getting purchased by the American companies or start orbiting around them. So now, how do we actually, what can be done to solve this problem? Because then one has to go into look, okay, this is the problem statement, and what would you do? What would you do after? But first of all, how to solve it? First of all, understand the problem. First of all, we have to agree that there must be a priority, and the priority must be the control of those assets. Once we agree on the problem statement, then we have to look into how this is how we can do it, and how we can do it. of course, some people may dream that government or the European Commission can themselves, recreate the stack and build it on their own. Somehow, some public company can do that. I do not think this is the solution. The solution is can only come from our industry. So the beauty is that the good news is that Europe is not a desert. Europe has a lot of industrial capacity. Europe has a lot of talent, patents, very clever people, and especially a strong industry, even in the digital sector. So Europe can do it. We are not so much behind that we cannot really achieve the ownership of this of the important elements of the stack. We have to understand, however, that our industry is extremely fragmented, whether we are talking about SMEs or even larger companies. European industry is too fragmented to make it. We don't control most of the critical elements, and therefore the industry alone cannot do it. It will only be able to do it if there is a strong partnership with the public sector. So here is the request, the demand is to have, a very bold and very aimed industrial strategy, industrial policy that helps the private sector to go in the right direction and to essentially defragment the industry, have the industry towards the priorities. So a few things are super important in this respect. If you think about the role of public procurement, there has been a lot of public discussion on this lately. So I think it's self-evident. But the idea is if our companies had the certainty or at least some level of certainty that governments and the public sector will be buying from them in the last 10 or 15 years, they will have a big boost. They will have a lot of investment will naturally come. And therefore, just by doing that, the industry will certainly react and go in the right direction. So this is something which is really achievable. It is possible. We don't know how much our public sector, it's not easy to find reliable statistics, but one could say that up to 80% of our digital services are probably coming from non-European vendors. And we all know the role of the public sector as the largest buyer, the best customer for our industry. This will really be a game changer. If we could shift a good portion of this 80% into European vendors, this will be a game changer. Other things, of course, that can be done is supporting the industry to federate, to work around common standards, to work around open source solutions as well. So we don't necessarily need industry to other solutions are working with what we have, which is many smaller companies, and help them to work together in federated ecosystems. This is something which is absolutely possible, and this is something that the public sector could support. Again, we could think about other things like funds and so on. to support the creation of this EuroStack. Now I'm going towards the conclusion, so we can then have the discussion. But the next slide is about another report which was published soon after in February. So you have all the information. The study was by Bertelsmann and SEPS, and this was authored by Francesca Bria and Paul Timmers. It's a much longer study than the previous one. This is about more than 200 pages, and it really describes in a greater level of detail all the elements of the stack, and it focuses a lot on what the Commission has been doing, the initiatives, especially in the area of DPI. This is the public infrastructure that they have been funding. So it's saying more or less the same things with probably a greater level of detail. So I think it's interesting. It's publicly available, free of charge, so you can easily download it if you want to read it. If you move ahead, I don't know if this was the last slide. Okay, the last slide is just the latest thing that has happened. A letter which was sent to von der Leyen a month ago, more or less, signed by 100 CEOs of top companies in Europe. Just very recently, another 60 companies signed just earlier this week. So this was a letter which made it to the press in all countries, really a lot of visibility. EXO itself was one of the signatories. The letter formulated four concrete demands. One was essentially to stimulate demand for European solutions, what we just described, to work around the open source solutions and common standards for interoperability. Third point was essentially around the EUCS, the certification scheme for cloud services, such that we could really make a difference between European cloud services and non-European cloud services. And the fourth point was, direct strategic funding towards priorities in terms of digital infrastructure, such that funding could be used for the purpose of filling the gap in terms of infrastructure. That is about it. I think this was the last slide. So I guess, Roberto, we could go into the conversation.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Sebastiano. So thanks a lot, for presenting, the concept of EuroStack. I believe that is interesting, for its global perspective, when we look at digital ecosystem that we are building in Europe, and then also looking, specifically how this could enable, a set of services that needs to build on top. So moving to the dialogue now. So of course, Sebastiano, you introduce yourself. I would like also to introduce, Matthias Mullert, who is a group CISO of Octer Group. And so he's also one of active contributors in EXO. So thanks, Matthias. It's a pleasure, to have you here. And the idea is to bring a little bit, some, let's say, perspective on cybersecurity in this debate, because of course the EuroStack is more generic approach, but we would like to zoom in a little bit more on the cybersecurity concept, and then discuss how what we can do, as part of the cybersecurity community. So I prepared a set of questions and then we will open, the debate also for questions from the audience. So to get also a feeling, also comments, from the attendees. So the first maybe point that I would like to touch upon, so going directly to the key digital assets. In a sense, Sebastiano, in your introduction of the EuroStack, you correctly, it pointed out, different type of assets, move it from the connectivity, cloud computing, AI, and so on, HPC. But then when we go on cybersecurity part, and then this more I would like to hear first from Matthias, in the sense when we look at cybersecurity and then the need, to strengthen the resilience, but also looking at the operational aspects of cybersecurity that you need to deal on a day-to-day basis. So in your view, what are the key strategic assets that we need to, let's say, that we need to value in Europe, and then what should be, the priority for us to really develop skills to control, to master those digital assets. Matthias?
Thank you very much, and welcome to everyone also from my side, and thank you very much to EXO and Sebastiano to have me for this lovely discussion. I try to give an answer in a three-folded way. So the first perspective, I think Sebastiano was already hitting on it. I think machine learning, AI is the topic that needs to be played. Is the game that needs to be played. So therefore, some sort of real-time intelligence platforms when it comes to cybersecurity is for me a rather important topic, and it should give us European-wise, and I don't want to see that in a scattered way, but in a community way, that should give us a bigger backbone to have an agile defense, right? So you need some sort of real-time intelligence platforms that can be done. The next thing that came to my mind was to have a decentralized trust-based system, right? So if we want to have a community of 27 countries, it should work on a trust basis, and I think that's one of the strong points of Europe, that we can work on a trust basis. But to establish that, I envision it rather as a decentralized system than to be one size fits it all and everything on one place. That, from a cyber resilience perspective, it doesn't make sense in the first place, right? Because if you hit one target and everything falls down, then this does not work. So I strongly argue for a decentralized and trust-based system. And the last thing, and during the introduction, Sebastiano hit a little bit on that point. For me, it needs to be human or user-centric technologies. Why is that for me important? I think that there was never such a thing as a disruptive technology. There was always the disruptive use of a technology, not the technology in itself is not disruptive. So therefore, it needs to be user-centric. It needs to involve our strong points that we actually live in Europe, and therefore that for me would be another key digital asset. So to wrap it up, real-time intelligence platform, decentralized and trust-based systems, and approach it with a user-centric technology.
Thanks, Matthias. That's quite interesting, because I mean, of course, there are specific investments that we are doing, like in Europe on AI. It's really changing, especially in cybersecurity, it's having massive impact. And then I like the concept of the user-centric technology, because of course we talk about all the quantum and then all the also Sebastiano pointed out, the connectivity with the 6G and so on, so that we'll have an important impact, but of course it's key also to bring the user at the center of the technology itself and make it very viable also for the different use that we need to do that. And the last point, it's clearly reminds me, when I was doing my PhD on trust and reputation systems. So it's still like a big word, like the trust, and of course in Europe we need to build the relevant trust, for cybersecurity. Sebastiano, just also on what is your perspective, your intake, because you're coming from looking also at the needs of the SMEs and what they identify in terms of key strategic pillars, mostly to enable, cybersecurity and to develop, their services also in with respect to cybersecurity. Yeah.
Well. Okay, thank you, Roberto. I think to connect a little bit the dots, I think it is important for SMEs to work with systems which are modular. In the sense that where everything is based on interoperability, and we are not dependent on a single proprietary solution, which would basically have all the integration, and where if one element fails, the entire system fails, and there is no possibility for third parties or for the users to replace one module with an equivalent one. And this is, if you like, the opposite scenario of where SMEs will thrive because each of them will be able to be responsible for a different element or a different module, and all of these modules are able to work with each other in a seamless way, and there is competition essentially among them. There is competition on the services on top, but the market is open, right? So the market favors and chooses the best solutions, the best technical solutions, or the best commercial solutions. But we are not in a situation where the single monopolist or the single dominant company controls the entire ecosystem, and therefore the SMEs are only things which are just at the periphery, and whatever they do is only dependent on the company that owns the assets, and they are at the mercy of whatever is decided at the center. So I think in this respect, also cybersecurity does not work differently from the other sides of the digital ecosystem. Cybersecurity is one key component, one key industry, and our companies can only thrive when the rules are clear, when common standards are followed, and when interoperability is enforced.
That's an interesting perspective, in the sense, to have indeed this modularity, and then it's more like a paradigm shift to have not a monolithic, let's say, type of services, but being able, to rely on a combination of services, that's interesting. And then, of course, interoperability standardization is key to enable that. And we were also doing an EXO market analysis, and then also looking indeed of what could be the enablers and that we need to have. Indeed, like interoperability, standardization, along with open source, there are key also factors that could really help with respect to that. I move directly to a next question, that you touched upon. Also moving, from the market perspective. In your presentation, Sebastiano, you really didn't speak about cybersecurity, because EuroStack is more like a generic, let's say, overall concept. But I had the feeling that cybersecurity is the essential pillar, that is transversal to really enable the EuroStack concept, and then to really develop the European strategic autonomy. So in your view, what are the market needs, and in particular the investments that needs to be done in cybersecurity? Somehow you mentioned in your presentation, but I would like just to hear, like specifically what you see strategic and then key in Europe to really invest on for cybersecurity.
Roberto, I'm sorry, but the connection got lost in the middle of your question.
Okay.
So perhaps I will let Matthias go ahead, and I will comment on what he says, because so it's otherwise you have to repeat everything.
Perfect. Yes,
All right.
Matthias.
Yeah. So on the market needs and what kind of investment types. So I think, as you already pointed out, Roberto touched on it a little bit in the introduction. I think we need, of course, more investment in advanced technologies, right? Once again, not to beat the horn too many times, but AI and machine learning, especially machine learning, I'm not such a huge fan of large language models. I think for cybersecurity, other models will be much more important than large language models. So investment in advanced technologies is for me one of the main points. Second talking point would be for me, of course, in homegrown innovations, so that we establish certain investment hubs that help homegrown innovations. And for me, one of the really important things is if we want to move on fast, there needs to be some sort of coordination coming along with this market needs as well. So not that everyone is working just on one market need, but we need to work on different market needs at the same time to get fast. And once again, I'm a little bit like a broken record on that perspective, but it also needs to be human-centric investments, right? So how can we get the people on board? Roberto, you said one of the key pillars will be cybersecurity, but one of the key pillars within cybersecurity will be the human. And therefore, I think a lot of investment should also go not just in the typical technical AI machine learning topics, but also in the human-centric investments.
Thank you, Matthias. Maybe, Sebastiano, I'll shift a little bit the framework, because indeed Matthias covered some points, and I'll just to hear, if we want to really boost the European economy, and in particular, if we have to, I don't know, spend 100 million euros on a single project, there was Draghi mentioning, large-scale projects, and personally, I see it also a way to have fast development, for the market, but also ensuring, developing of low TRL solutions that can enable sustainability for the future. So what will be your bet, where you put your money, and then in particular, seeing the needs of the different players and SMEs, but also critical infrastructure that we have in Europe?
Yes, I like that question. Because I'm going to say something, maybe I'm not sure I will make many friends, or maybe I make some friends and also make some enemies. Because I think we have been investing a lot of money. If you look at only the money spent at EU level, this is huge. Okay, there are very big projects, hundreds of millions, even billions of euros have been spent in technology. And now we should ask ourselves, was this money well spent? Are we really aware of anything substantial that has been developed with all this EU money, or not? Well, I think all of us have, in a way or another, seen that, let's say, to be polite, not always all of this money went into something that had a concrete deployment in the market or a concrete effect in the market. And I have tried to see a little bit to analyze a few cases, at least looking from my experience, and there is always a problem which kind of tends to repeat every time this public money is spent, and it is the fact that very often, instead of giving the money or the incentive or whatever to the industry, which is already on the market and already trying to solve a specific problem, What our public authorities tend to do is they tend to invent something new. They tend to invent a new thing, perhaps giving the money to academia, research institute, whatever, or even companies, but not those that are already in the market. They find others, which are those who are faster in maybe applying or writing the proposals, and the money is given to initiatives that essentially are not the market initiatives, they're not the market leaders, but others, which ultimately most likely will never reach the market, will never be deployed in the market. But then what they will do, they will first of all waste public money, and secondly, they will compete against the legitimate industry leaders, SMEs or larger companies, which are trying to do something. You see what I mean? And if you think about it, this has happened so many times. We have heard so much I have heard so many, legitimate companies complaining about this thing. Because why the hell do we have to compete against people which get subsidies and never deploy anything on the market?
It's an interesting perspective. I see, that maybe, you want to advocate for a better coordination between the public and the private sector, to ensure that there is alignment, also both an investment that is done by the private sector itself, but also to make it really, to really capitalize on what we develop in Europe, to ensure more a coherent strategy with respect to that. But if you have to choose one specific area, where you put the money, I know Matthias maybe the answer, but with just word, but in your view, just if you want to bet on, there is anything specific that we need to develop for cybersecurity?
Well, I leave the cybersecurity topic to Matthias, but for me, if we want to have some kind of sovereignty in Europe, and sovereignty means not only security, but also competitiveness, the first asset which we must have, because everything is built on that, for me, is cloud computing. There is nothing in my opinion, my humble opinion, there is nothing as important as that. Because everything runs on that. That is, there are obviously other options, but I will not neglect this one.
Okay, thanks, Sebastiano. And I think that, maybe that it could come at hand, one of the words that you used before, that is federation. I think like also to scale up, from that perspective, if you want something faster on the market. Yeah.
Exactly.
Matthias?
You don't need, sorry, but Roberto, just to finish, you
sure.
need to have the single big champion that dominates, that becomes a European cloud champion. You have a lot of cloud companies in Europe which are leader maybe at the national level, in France, in Germany, in Italy, or wherever. They just need to federate. And this is already happening, by the way. Yeah, there are attempts to do it, and I know they are quite keen. So I really think that the moment we manage to shift the demand, to create a demand for sovereign public services, sovereign digital services, the industry will go in that direction. So the government has a role to play in directing the demand, but then, it's the industry who will find the solutions.
Thank you, Sebastiano. Matthias, your perspective?
Yeah, to make it short. So basically, also in my thinking, it should be a coordinated process, right? I'm thinking of innovation hubs and sandboxes, right? So innovation hubs, that there's a certain amount of coordination going on, because if everyone is working on the same topic, cybersecurity will fall short, right? We need people to work on cloud, but also on EDR, also on XDR, also on so many different things. So my vision would be that we have cybersecurity hubs within the capital cities of all the European countries, and they coordinate who is working on what. And just to iterate a little bit also on the sandbox, I don't mean that in a technical perspective, but we also need to enable company to work fast and also fail fast, right? So we need people with courage. We need people with innovation. We don't need people who are capable of filling out 90 pages to apply for a certain funding, right? So therefore, I want to give people a playground where they can, work fast, achieve something fast, even fail fast, right? Coming back to Sebastiano, right? If you fail, then that's not a bad thing, but then someone maybe was better. But for me, federation, or as I would like to call it, collaboration and coordination is for me key. And please allow startups and so forth to fail fast, but we need those kind of people who are willing to advance.
Thanks. So it's more like a change of mindset, like a way of working on that. I have one last question, and then I will open for the floor. Just as from what we discussed so far, the last, I think, cybersecurity strategy was from 2020, but then, there's always been a discussion about what is an European cybersecurity industrial policy. So do you think that we need to have something now? I mean, like specific for cybersecurity, like a new cybersecurity strategy, or also specific industrial policy, linking also to the EuroStack as well. So just a quick answer from your side before opening the floor for questions.
Quickly, the answer is yes. I think we need a bold industrial strategy, digital industrial strategy that includes a stronger cybersecurity element. And as I said in the beginning, we are in desperate need for an alignment between the public and the private sector. And we can make it, we can win this battle, but we need our public sector to work with us.
Thank you, Sebastiano. Yeah. Matthias?
Yeah, thank you. Interesting question. From my perspective, I think that we need to go to a dynamic and adaptive model. We don't need policies and bureaucracies, but we need a process. And that for me is where we might need to change our way of thinking tomorrow or the day after, right? Depending on what's happening. So I rather advocate for a strategy implemented by a process that is adaptable, that is dynamic, than rather to any further regulations.
Thank you, Matthias. We'll open the floor for questions from the chat. I saw before a hand from Chris. I don't know whether Chris, yes, you like to comment, to ask something. Yes, we cannot hear you. You are muted. If you can introduce also yourself. Thank you. Should work now. Yeah.
Can you hear? Okay.
Yes.
I'm coming at it from a slightly different perspective. I see two things that Europe is failing on. One is allowing people to get rich quickly, which is the taxation system, which is a serious handicap because it doesn't allow people to take risks. The second problem is that you need to allow people to fail a lot quicker and to not lose their house and lose everything that they own, as would happen in Silicon Valley, for instance. So there has to be some guardrails to that. But as long as the taxation system is prohibitive of taking risks, and as long as there is no, you don't allow people to get rich, venture capital will not step in the way it has to support small cybersecurity or other ventures of any kind. So this needs to be tied to let's say if you have an industrial policy, first of all, you don't want to add bureaucracy and in additional steps and paperwork. And second of all, you have to allow people to get rich and fail quickly.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I think that it connects also to the points raised by Matthias. Thanks for sharing your view about that. So it's interesting, to hear different kind of perspectives. I'm checking if there are some other questions. I see that in the chat there are a couple of initiatives that have been promoted. There is one indeed, the European alternatives, also in and then there is the CyberArk, that of course is the marketplace that EXO has developed, to promote European solutions. So I think that if you're not registered, you should have a look also at that. I see Bart, you put a comment on the chat, and please.
Yes, I'm going to make a non-political statement, and I think that at least the SMEs that I know often don't have the awareness of the topics that we've been talking about here. I've heard in this conversation and many other conversations lots of complicated words about standards and protocols and what have you. And I think there's an enormous gap between the manager of an SME who focuses on their business and the world that we're talking about. And for me, if we don't generate demand within Europe for what we've been talking about, it's not going to happen. You need to have enough. You need to create enough awareness to create demand, because once you have demand, people will respond to demand, will be able to, whether it's venture capital or whatever system it is, will react to that. And that down to earth education and awareness for the small businesses, for me, there's an enormous gap. I know very good business leaders, and they don't get anything of this. Nothing.
Thank you, Bart. I don't know whether Sebastiano, Matthias would like to comment.
Yes, well, I think, of course, I agree with you that all of this discussion is difficult to grasp for people in our constituency, for entrepreneurs. But because you asked a good question, how do we create the demand? Because that is, in my opinion, that is the core of the problem. Creating the demand, and creating the demand. I can tell you something. I was talking recently to someone at Accenture. They said, "Look, we are one of the largest integrators in the world," because it was an interesting conversation, because you have people and companies don't buy technology, they buy solutions. Okay, and so if you want to reach the market, it's only the system integrators which will actually talk to the clients and put on the market a real solution. As companies, we can only create the bits, but we are not going to be able to do like Apple. We are not going to have the complete integration, and we are not going to be able to create something for the customers, at least not for the big ones. But Accenture, they told me, look, what you are doing with this EuroStack is super important, because we are analyzing the trends, and we predict a trend in the European market, a growing demand for sovereign services. Sovereign services means, of course, solutions which are from Europe, in Europe, and so on and so forth. And of course, at the moment, this is difficult, right? Because what can you do? You can only use the US services at the moment. But there are a lot of companies which are producing very good solutions. And the moment there is enough demand out there, you can bet that the integrators will jump on it, and they will start putting on the market, integrated solutions which meet this request. And the key element to create in the longer term, the demand is to shift the purchases of the public sector. Of course, you cannot force the single companies to buy European or versus buy American. You cannot do that. I mean, this would be too much. But what you can do by law is forcing or giving a direction to the public buyers, the public administrations. If they have to buy European, this is going to be a complete shift in the market. So I think I'm trying to, fill the gap here between the high-level conversations and the real needs of the entrepreneurs, because that's also my job, And for me, there is hope, and because if we convince the public sector to do the right thing, then maybe this discussion is still abstract. But believe me, sooner or later, the entrepreneur will see the results.
Thank you, Sebastiano. I think, that there is one important aspect, and maybe personally, there's a personal opinion. I mean, we need to really identify what we need to build, as a strategy for Europe, because we cannot reinvent everything from scratch. That is, of course, it will be quite challenging and quite detrimental, to build everything from scratch. But we need to be able to control, to master, and then to really have a say on what we use, and then to be enabled to really rely on the technology in a confident and trustworthy way. So that needs to be established. So that's for me is key to. That's why I was asking before about what are the key assets, because once you identify the key assets, it's strategic. That are strategic for the economy. So that is important to look into that. I see that there is one question from Erland. We are a bit over time, but I would like to take the question from Erland. And then there is one comment also in the chat that I'll let you all read from John. Hi, Erland.
Hello. So I'm Erland from Norway. I'm a founder and CEO at Secure Practice, and we make SaaS services for helping companies with better cybersecurity. And I want to pick up Sebastiano, who said companies buy solutions, not technology. And solutions in this space, I came to think about, why are we kind of not competing better? Well, one reason is companies buy best of suit instead of best of breed. Because for the individual buyer, the stakeholder who actually makes the buying decision, they consider risk. And for them personally, making a bet on, not really a bet, on the suit they already have, it's very simple. So this is a very tough competitive edge. Like I say, our biggest competitor, regardless of whatever we build, is Microsoft. And that's just how it is. So what we need is to lower the risk for buyers to buy something that is best of breed, because it has to be really good. And one thing I came to think about when you mentioned this about federation and cloud services, one thing that companies are indeed asking for during procurement is suppliers, sub-suppliers. What are the data centers you're using? In our experience, companies who see that we are using Microsoft Azure, they actually, although the data transfer risk is bigger, it is much lower risk for them to choose a vendor who uses Microsoft Azure than something else, because the company has already done risk assessments for Microsoft Azure throughout all of the products that they ever buy. So it's very well documented, so it's no extra effort. So speaking of federation, maybe one actual idea could be to federate on risk assessments of European cloud providers who we rely on, so that if a customer needs for procurement a good third kind of neutral risk assessment on the infrastructure that you are using, although it's in Europe, it's still something that we haven't done a risk assessment for already, then this is something we can coordinate among our community.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Erland. It's interesting, this concept about understanding the risk. I manage that. The last word from Matthias, and then I think that we are at the end. I'll give the floor to Francisco.
Excellent. Thank you. And I need to head off then also. So interesting points. My idea about also coming back to Bart and Erland is I assume a solution like a secured GDP would be interesting. and combined with tax incentives. So basically tax incentives for the ones who are providing solutions, and also tax incentives for the people buying European solutions. So security GDP might actually do the trick.
Thank you, Matthias. Thanks, Sebastiano, for your feedback, and then also everyone for contributing. I give back the floor to Francisco, and thanks, sorry for being a bit late.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks, everyone. And again, Sebastiano, Matthias, and Roberto, and everyone that interacted. We'll be sending around the slides pitch, the EuroStack pitch, and every other support document. Let's keep in touch, and if you found it interesting, let us know, and we'll reassess and come back to you with any follow-up actions. So thank you, everyone, for your time, and have a great week.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.